Retro.
Hi, this is Emily Swallow, the Armorer in The Mandalorian. You're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. This is the way.
All right, welcome back to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And we are putting the news aside to discuss some more Star Wars comics with a look at the High Republic Fear of the Jedi issues 3 through 5. But before we get into the latest from Marvel, Jay, please remind everybody where we can be found on social media.
Sure thing. No fear or illusions here. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust.
Okay, so the dish is aligned, the signal's boosted to maximum output, the show's down, and we're now broadcasting the galaxy. Here we go. So our last episode was looking at issues 1 and 2, and I thought it was going to be a little while before we had an opportunity to get to issues 3 and 5, but there's no news this week. I mean, as much as I like the StarWars.com website, they are really milking their Andor coverage. I mean, every single week there's like three new stories about Andor, and that's fine. I mean, it's one of the best Star Wars anything we've ever had, but you just can't keep bringing that up in news. So here we are. We're talking about some High Republic comics again. Just as a reminder, the writer for these issues is Kevin Scott. Artist is Marika Cresta. The colorist is Jim Campbell. The letter is VC's Ariana Meyer. Cover artist is Phil Noto, and the book design is Carlos Lau. So, Jay, the first 2 issues of this 5-issue miniseries followed Keeve Trennis and Master Skier, Lorna D, and some others as they liberated Naboo from the Nile. And now the action is shifting to Eriadu in what is kind of the climactic battle in what was the Occlusion Zone before the storm wall fell down. And so we're going to get 3 issues that really do go through that battle. A lot of interesting things happen. What did you think about these 3 issues overall?
There is a lot going on as far as, as the title represents fear of the Jedi. I mean, that's basically what this was about, was addressing that fear and overcoming that fear in a lot of different ways. And it wasn't just emotional fear, fear of the nameless. It was fear of losing, fear of disappointment, and so many different types of things. And it was an emotional journey, but it was also a very epic payoff in the end too, in a lot of ways. And always love seeing Lorna D. She's definitely one of my favorite characters ever in the High Republic. And we also get an amazing speech by Keeve in this one, probably one of the best kind of monologue speeches that I've seen in the High Republic. So yeah, it's epic space battles, so many good things going on overall. But yeah, I enjoyed it. What about you?
Yeah, I like it overall. I have the benefit of having finished reading Charles Soule's Trials of the Jedi. And so I know how this fits into the grand scheme of things. And honestly, I was reflecting on this. If I didn't know what happened in Trials of the Jedi, then I might be a little disappointed. Like, well, wait a minute. There's a whole lot of stuff that hasn't happened yet. Like what happened to Marchion Ro? What happened to the Nameless? What happened to, Justaros? A lot of people here, because this brings us to the end of the conflict with the Nile. One of the last things we hear in these 3 issues is that the Nile have surrendered. How?
Right.
Why? Yeah. I mean, and so all that's to say, it's, they were dealing with a time constraint. Since Trials of the Jedi came out in June, and this started in, I believe, January, they only had parts of 6 months to get these 5 issues to tell this part of the conflict. I get that. I kind of wish they would have figured out a way to put 2 more issues in there and to focus on some other things, because there's I know you haven't read Trials of the Jedi yet, Jay, so I don't want to spoil it for you. There's a lot of other things going around going on around this battle, and I would have liked to seen them represented visually as opposed to just what I read in Charles Soule's book, which is
Mhm.
fantastic. Don't get me wrong.
Mhm.
And also, it kind of felt like, uh, as much as I like everything Kevin Scott does, the conclusion was very abrupt. I mean, it
I was
was,
just gonna say that, yeah.
yeah, it's like all of a sudden we overcame this one thing and oh, the Nile surrendered. And
Mhm.
oh, okay, how? I mean, it's like, uh, so, um, I'm on record with saying that when it comes to High Republic, my favorite two authors are Charles Soule and Kevin Scott. And this does not lessen it. But again, we just covered the Inquisitor series from that came out last year. That could have used a couple more issues to tell a fuller story. And I would like to, if for nothing else, I would like to have had just a little bit more space amongst these 5 issues to see more of the combat that was going on around Eriadu, because it followed all the Jedi. And we're getting these reports of all these gigantic fleets that are showing up, both Republic and Nile. But then all of a sudden, there's like Master Skier and one other vector that's out there being able to do anything. I was like, well, where's this gigantic battle? We're not seeing it here.
Mhm.
So that's my criticism of it. That being said, I love all these characters. Getting to see Keeve Trennis do her thing, Lauren D do her thing, Tay Sarek, Master Skier, Orbelin, all of them. These are characters that have been featured in the comics time and time again. So it was cool getting to see them. I just would love to have seen them more than what we did.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder too if that's sort of the point of this particular series, and at least from these issues that we have, in the High Republic comics in general, is just to be more of a focus on
Hmm.
these characters specifically and these emotional and specific fears that they have to overcome, as opposed to more of a broader scope and spectrum of things that are going on. Because I am with you, we wouldn't even have really known that it was above Eriadu unless we were told that. And
Sure.
as much as as I was saying, like this epic space battle, it was great, but the panels were great and all of the illustrations and everything were great too. But it did lack a little bit of continuity, I guess you could say, in my brain. And as far as the very end being abrupt, I'll admit I had to go back and do a little bit more research as far as why did the storm wall, like, how did this even, like, what? Because I
Yeah.
understood the storm wall as being more of a physical thing than, and it was, but and that's why it's kind of like the same thing when the Death Star blew up. You was like, "Oh, yay, Death Star blew up, yay!" But no, there's more to it than that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Right. So address a couple of things you said there. With the storm wall, it is a system for bringing ships out of hyperspace. So it's not so physical as it is. It's a debilitating when it happens, when a ship comes so that they don't have the appropriate codes to get to the storm wall. You find out in Trials of the Jedi how that the storm wall fell,
Oh,
and it's really important to in that book, and it makes complete sense when you find out all the reasoning for that. But yeah, the storm wall goes down here. No one ever asks, why. Everyone gets suspicious of it, as they should. But again, it's just kind of like it's down and everyone takes it for granted. The storm wall's down, so we can go liberate Naboo, which they did in the first 2 issues. Now we've done that. Let's go take out the Nile at Eriadu. And that's fantastic as well. For me, you get to the end of these 5 issues, and the Nile keeps showing up in waves at Eriadu, and they're capable of jamming all of the communications from the High Republic until Keeve and Real Dario sneak aboard this giant scav droid that's attacking the Geos, and they take out that communications block from there. And then all of a sudden, a Mon Cal fleet and a Hutt fleet and the Togoruta fleet and a High Republic fleet, all these other fleets show up. But then the fight ends 2 pages later. We don't get to
mhm,
see any of this gigantic conflict between all these fleets in the Nile. And that could have been like so incredibly cinematic. It just didn't get there was no space left in five
right,
issues to show that part of the battle there.
right, right.
And so that was just kind of my disappointments of the 5 issues that this little series was.
That's understandable. Yeah, it was kind of reminiscent of The Rise of Skywalker in some ways,
You
in
took
in
the
that way.
words right out of my mouth. Yes. Chewie and Lando show up with a fleet of, it's not a fleet, sir. They're just people.
Right,
Right.
right.
And here they are. And it might as well have been the exact same thing. So that's a good call on your part.
Thanks.
Okay. So yeah, we kind of go through some of the things that happened in the three issues again, as we were just mentioning in the first two issues. Keeve Trennis took her fleet to Naboo. They managed to reclaim the planet for the High Republic after the Stormwell fell. They left Kelnaka behind with some other Jedi and Republic fighters to help secure everything, and then they went to Eriadu to back up uh, Admiral Kronara on the Third Horizon. The battle's not going great because the Nile keeps showing up in waves. They are fighting for their lives because they know it's kind of now or never. The Nile are either going to establish control or they're going to get wiped out. And so the Republic ships that are form a blockade of the planet. Keeve Trennis is, we saw this in the first two issues, she is not content to sit put on the bridge of the ship and command things from there. She wants to be on her own vector and be in the midst of the action. But Commander Velko is not letting her get away with this time. What did you think about that message and that conversation between Keeve and Velko?
Yeah, because I mean, Velcro really isn't, she's not Keeve's superior. She's not even part of the same really chain of command. I mean, Velcro's part of she's a Republic aide, basically, right? She was on Starlight Beacon at one point. But I think that maybe that's where the point comes in, is that she saw how the Jedi fell at Starlight Beacon, and she feels like Keeve is too important to risk,
Mm-hmm.
and so she's not really, I don't think she's really undermining Keeve so much as she is, it's not really I mean, it's more of a provisional thing than a tactical thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't see it as undermining Keeve at all. I mean, she points out to Keeve that you were appointed the marshal of this fleet, which means you're in charge of the fleet. Your place is on the bridge here, and you were supposed, you're the light of the Jedi. You're a beacon. Everyone's looking to you, and you can't do that. You can't be the source of inspiration if you're out there in the field. You need to be here giving orders. And you alluded to the speech that Keeve gives at the end. That wouldn't have been possible from the cockpit of a Vector here.
Mhm.
That's what made this victory possible. And Keeve needed reminding that people believe in her. She was put in a position of command because everyone saw her potential, even though she doubts herself. That was something we saw in the first two issues.
Right.
After she left that meeting where between Avar and Skier and herself, you know, Avar says to Skier, you've been quiet, and Skier's like, I don't know what else there's to say. It's like, and when Avar says, everyone believes in her and how capable it is, and Skier points out, but yeah, the key is that she believes it herself. And
Right.
so there is just that bit that Keeve does not trust her ability to lead. She sees herself as a person of action fighting on the front line, and they need her to give everyone an inspiration. And like I just said, I'm repeating myself. If she'd gone out in the Vector, she would not have been in a position to get on that scav droid and give that speech that made the rally possible to defeat the Nile.
So true. Well
Mm.
said.
One of the things we got going on in these three issues is that Master Orbelin, that little shapeshifter guy, he's a green blob. We're used to him as having a humanoid shape up until, of all people, Lorna D stabbed him through the helmet with a lightsaber uh, back in phase 1 of the High Republic. And now he's just kind of content being an amorphous blob, but he keeps splitting himself into pieces so that he can be more places at once, including multiple vectors. What do you think about Orbelin throughout these three issues?
I can empathize with the guy. You feel like you want to try to handle so many things, and you're trying to put yourself in too many places at once. And I don't know, I kind of see him as, almost a metaphor for life in a lot of ways, that as much as you want to be able to be everywhere and help everyone, that the more thin you spread yourself, the more likely you are to sabotage the entire operation and lose yourself in the process. And that's kind of what happened.
Yeah. One of my other criticisms about these 5 issues of Fears of the Jedi is that there's no real epilogue. because the last image we get of him is after two of his parts are destroyed in other vectors. He can no longer like maintain focus or control, and his form just kind of dissolves. And it's up to that Jedi Padawan to like gather him and bring him to safety.
Mhm.
But we don't know what the final outcome of all that is.
Right.
And
Right.
so that was just kind of they're getting ready to do a High Republic finale comic from Marvel. And I'll definitely pick that up. It's coming out at the end of this month to see how everything shakes out. But I'd kind of like to have had that answer here, I think. Just get a little bit of reassurance at the end of these 5 issues, at the end of the battle, that he was okay, or he's one with the Force now, or something like that.
Right, no, I agree, and I don't know, did you ever see that movie back in the '80s where I can't think of the name of it, but he makes a copy of himself and he keeps it's Michael Keaton, and he makes a
Oh,
copy, and
Duplicity.
then there's
Yeah. Yeah.
duplicity, yes,
Yeah.
that's what Orlin was doing, and it's like every time you make a copy of yourself, it becomes weaker and less able
Yeah.
to be like
Copies of
the
copies
original
and that type of
copy.
thing.
Yes,
Right. Yeah.
yes, and that's what I
Yeah.
I was reminded of in this.
Yeah. And everyone kept saying, because like at one point he said, "Oh, I lost a brother," and I think it was Keeve on the bridge of the GS is like, "You didn't lose a brother, you lost part of yourself here,
Mhm.
because you keep dividing yourself into smaller and smaller pieces." But I mean, Oberlin's a fascinating creature. We've never seen another one of these type of
Right,
aliens
yeah.
anywhere in Star Wars, so I'd like to know more about it. But yeah, that was interesting. Yeah, someone else who I don't think gets enough credit in this series is Skier. He's out there basically in charge of the Jedi vectors, which get whittled down to not a whole lot very quickly there. I'm still trying to figure out what the story is with him. I kind of get the feeling that he still has not completely repaired his connection to the Force based on the way things were going, but he has the wisdom of a Jedi Master. At one point, in the 5th issue, he's talking to the Padawan as all the Jedi are seeing images of the things that they fear worst, like not just the Jedi, everybody is. And he says to the Padawan, "A Jedi must always face fear, or Adon, that's the name of the Padawan. In this case, attempt to blast it from the stars." And when Keith says, "I don't remember that being amongst the Jedi tenets," he says, like, I'm paraphrasing, but that was kind of a fun moment. I'm going to miss Skier. I think the notion of a Trandoshan Jedi, we
Yes.
this is the only one that we have in Star
Mhm.
Wars. We have multiple Wookiee Jedi at this point, and Arkoff and Kanaka, Buryaga, and the like. But this is the only Trandoshan here. So I hope they give us more stories about him in the future.
I hope so too. He is such a cool character. And I think you're onto something when you say that he hasn't completely restored his connection to the Force because he was kind of on the fringes in this. And I understand that his story wasn't the focus of these issues as it has been in the past with him overcoming what was it, the McGrath syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
But he's still a guiding force, pun intended, in all of this. Regardless, as you said, he still has that wisdom of a Jedi.
Right. And then, of course, we got Tay Sarek, who we were talking about last time. The Hand of Cerberus, that Sith artifact, has been destroyed, but we find him trying to repair it. And he's so desperate, he throws his companion droid, Scoot, into a wall and
Yeah.
damages him here. And then when Sister Hatar, who's capable of projecting these fear images to all the different people in the fleet, shows up, he has a very rough confrontation with his husband, Vildar Mac. What did you
Yeah.
think about Tay's story here?
Well, Tay, we've followed him. I've always loved Tay since the very, very
Mhm.
beginning that we met him all the way, back. Gosh, I don't even know how many issues it was now, but on Jeddah, essentially. And his story arc has been one that's been super fun to follow. And yeah, his fear, as you said, with losing Vildar and then this hand of Cerberus and everything, it's obviously not like him to throw Scoot against a wall and to do all of these things. And his arc, I think, really challenges a lot of the fear of attachment in a
Mhm.
lot of ways, like that institutional Jedi fear. And, if he can process some of his fear in the way that he did, it actually can lead to resilience. And his story is just it's so intensely personal. I mean, not that some of the others in this particular set of issues wasn't, but the fears that the others had to overcome were a little bit more not as personal, with the nameless or, with different things like that. But his was definitely that one-on-one, which also, in a lot of ways, his rejection of the hand of Cerberus also kind of, echoes a lot of other redemption arcs that we've had, like
Yeah.
Luke throwing away his saber in Return of the Jedi, for example, but it's his is more it's more of an internal redemption for himself so that he can break free of this whole illusion that he's under.
Yeah, yeah, I like this story. I think it was one of the more powerful parts of these 3 issues, because, and he goes on to tell this vision of Vildar, because when the vision of Vildar shows up that Hatar is projecting, it's this very accusatory vision. It's like, you're this thief. You've been using the hand of Cerberus. I knew that you couldn't handle this when I met you, and you're a liar. And he's very, very accusatory. And then Tay Sarek puts everything together, and he admits that he was using the hand of Cerberus because it was about filling a hole where you used to be. Talking about Vildar. Vildar died. He just doesn't. He's a Kifar. He doesn't have as long life as, I can't remember what Tay Sarek's species is called. And Tay's been struggling to deal with that loss. And
Mhm.
so he told himself that using the hand of Cerberus gave him power and it gave him the ability to help others. But in the end, it was all really about having that power and something to divert his loneliness, his sadness, his fear from. And as he's admitting this thing, the vision of Vildar softens. It's supposed to be this projection of fear that Sister Tar is sending him, and he conquers it by acknowledging all these things about him. And he's having those flashbacks to when Vildar was passing, in those final moments where it
Yeah.
was a rather sweet goodbye, bittersweet, so to speak. And he wanted to help others, but in the end, this was just all a coping mechanism. You're not Vildar. You're not here, not now, not ever. And he slashes through that image because he knows it's not the same person there. He makes peace with the loss. He kind of talks about how, he couldn't cope with it then. And he even, when he's asked afterwards, are you fine? He's like, no, I'm not, but one day I might be after that.
Mhm.
And that, I think, says a whole lot about grief. And
Oh, yeah.
it's very brave to admit when, you've just experienced something like that. No, I'm not fine now, but I've had the breakthrough, and I will be able to be okay when it's all
Right.
and over.
Right. That's so
Yeah.
true. Yeah, and as you're talking about that too, I mean, when you talked about him Tay trying to fill this hole with the gauntlet, and that's
Mhm.
what the gauntlet kind of offered to him was a different type of power. But it
Right.
was fueled by fear and grief. And it tricks you into thinking that control will give you peace. And so his whole thing was, peace comes from letting go. And that's exactly what he had to do.
Mhm. Mhm. Other things I mentioned that with this, with these 5 issues, it could have benefited from another couple. And one of the reasons for that was I found it very jarring when Sister Hertar and her portion of the Nihil Fleet showed up, and we kind of come to find out that she was as much as a victim as anybody else. Um, we get these images of these nameless that have wings that are flying through a space and attacking all of these Republic and Jedi ships and everything like that. How quickly were you able to figure out what was going on here? Because it was pretty jarring for me. I have to admit, I was not certain exactly what was happening for a while here, and it took my second read through these comics when I was putting together the notes to fully grasp all the details.
No, I'm with you because and I think that that is a triumph of these issues is that it makes us have to do that. You know what I mean? Is that you're so buying into the fact that you think that these like what's illusion, what's real, what's not, like what's going on here? Is she really there? Are these things there? And so yeah, I'm totally with you. I had to kind of step back from that a little bit myself.
Yeah, because one of the things that they see is a giant nameless chewing down on the Geos. This
Yeah.
Jedi long beam, and so we got a nameless that's like 20, 30 times larger than any nameless you've ever seen or heard of. And all
Mhm.
this is, and the point was like, oh come on, this is ridiculous. And when you come to find out that it's really this fear illusion that Sister Hertara is projecting, I don't know that that really made me feel better about everything. It's just like, oh, okay, that's why they're seeing it. It it almost seemed a little gimmicky. On the other hand, I do like the way that Keeve Trennis figured it out, which was, how is it possible that I'm able to use the Force and keep us all from getting sucked out into space when there's
Yes.
in this breach in the cockpit and there's a giant nameless chomping down on my ship? I should be, debilitated at this point, but I'm not. So something else is going on here.
Mhm. Yep,
But
and it
yeah,
happened to be this huge scav droid.
right. Which also was a little strange. What do you think about that?
Well, I know, for me, it was I thought to myself, "Oh my gosh," of course, Marchion Ro would manufacture something like this to this extent, but then again, I thought to myself, "How?" I mean, and why? Why go to this extent of creating this huge thing when you could do just as much damage with, other ships or, other methods?
Yeah, because it seemed a little Saturday morning cartoon to me with the gigantic scav droid there. It's like, because we're used to all these scav droids that would fly in fleets, dozens of them at a time, and attack a ship and tear it apart. And then all of
Mhm.
a sudden, someone's like, you know what we need? One of those 100 times larger. And, okay. Uh,
"Let's
sure.
make a chocolate
And
chip cookie." "No, let's just make one big chocolate chip cookie."
yeah, there you go. And the thing is like, if it wasn't for Sister Hatar being there, would this thing have really been effective at all? Or had it just not been like blown out of the sky the first thing?
Right, yeah, I think they definitely need Sister Hatar to make it work,
Hmm.
for
Hmm.
sure.
Right. Speaking of her, what did you think about her? I mean, she kind of shows up. She ends up begging Jedi Master Sababa to end her because she's like, she's in this, I can't remember what they call it, but this like machine of pain that's causing her
Mhm.
to project all this fear. The more she struggles against it, the more she hurts, the more fear she throws out. And so she projects an image of herself onto the Geos and asks Sababa, who is a former child of the storm, to end her and put her out of her misery.
Right, yeah, I felt bad for her because, I mean, they at first, when we're introduced to her, we know how young she is, and I mean, to put that into perspective, she's like a preteen, and, you kind of forget that in these issues sometimes, but she is just a child, really. And she's been manipulated and conditioned, and she's yeah, you just really feel for her. So, when in Master Chibaba, they basically are kindred spirits because, Chibaba was also manipulated and tortured and mutilated by the Nile. Very much reminds me of the Yuzan Vong in the way that, to bring in legends on this, the way that they would capture and shape their prisoners and use the mutilation and that type of thing for their prisoners to serve them essentially. And so it was really sad actually
Yeah.
because for again, just to kind of put that into perspective, that Hatar is a child.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, she's a young woman here. She has not had a long, full life, but she also knows is like there's no other way out for her. Because if the
Mhm.
Jedi trying to effectuate some sort of rescue on that spider squab, which they call that gigantic Nile ship that looks like a spider in space, they're giving up the rest of the fight here. And it's not to say that it would even work, that she'd be able to get out of there and reclaim the life that she once had. She's, whether coerced or not. I mean, it's kind of the unspoken Sparta Sababa, which is that what redemption has he received and under what conditions? We don't know that. Yeah, I mean, Keith Trennis did not want him on her ship for this. What's waiting for her tar once this is all over? So it is it's a pretty noble sacrifice on her
Mhm.
part, which is,
Yeah.
this is the hand she's been dealt, and this is her out. She's making that sacrifice so that the Nile lose and the Republic and the rest of the galaxy wins.
Exactly, and it's a release for her to be able
Yeah.
to, she even as she falls back, she says, like, "Finally," or something like that,
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
"Thank you."
Yeah.
which again is kind of sad.
Yeah, there's a few other details we could talk about the story, but we kind of reached the end of this episode and the discussion here. Is there um, anything that you think we really need to cover before we go?
I just want to point out once again, Lorna D,
Yeah.
she's and she has her humor throughout the whole thing. There was one line where she says something about, and I am so not afraid of Markion Row or something of that nature. And I just love the moral line that she walks through this whole thing, that she hasn't been completely converted, quote unquote, yet, but yet she's still an ally. And I love that moral gray area that she's
Hmm.
in. And I just think it's great. And again, Keeve's speech is chef's kiss in this.
Yeah, with regards to Lorna, she's a realist, right? I mean,
Oh,
where
yeah.
Key was talking about, it's like, someone just died and we're all making jokes about it. And I think Lorna's position is like, this is war. There's a certain amount of gallows humor that comes with this. And yeah, we can try and save all the lives, but first and foremost, we got to win this battle before
Mhm.
we can start worrying about saving people here. And yeah, Keith's speech is really quite good. She echoes a lot of things that were said by Keeve Trennis, that, we're here to help. We're, the light of the galaxy. It's a great 2-page spread where it's talking about showing things going on in the galaxy. She's nervous because they're sitting inside the scav droid, and then Real
Mhm.
Dario puts her on camera, and she includes the whole thing. It's like, we are more than Jedi. We are more than the Republic. We are light and life, and we stand together, whatever the cost. Yeah, really, really fantastic speech that she
Absolutely.
ended all this thing, and and then you just in the final panel when Venick is telling her, the now surrendered and they've won, and it finally dawns on her what that means. You just see the tears streaming down her cheek. I mean,
Mhm.
when we met Keeve, she was a Padawan. She got promoted to Jedi Knight, and now she's a Jedi Master and a Marshal of the Stormwall Defense Fleet. And we know she's going to leave the Jedi not
Yeah.
too long from now.
Yeah.
So that's a story we
Sigh.
still need to get. Yeah, I hate to see it, but it
I
is what
know,
it is. So,
exactly. And, one more thing about Keeve too is we've seen she always had that little element of self-doubt. We always saw those little panels that was more of her inner speech being able to be seen by the reader for our own benefit, and
mhm.
that goes all the way back to when she was a Padawan. But I have to say one thing that I wanted to mention too about Keeve's speech, and I wrote this down, so I'm glad that I found it before we ended, is just the fact that she made it so personal, and she included the people of the Republic in the galaxy to almost like invite them to be her, and
Mhm.
she them. And I think that that's something that was lost in future generations of Jedi, in that, and Luke Skywalker even said it, there was so much hubris, and Keeve just put that all aside. And that's what made all those people show up, was because they were able to empathize and they were able to identify with Keeve and understand that, yeah, this is their fight too. And nobody's perfect and we're all afraid. And that's okay. We have each other.
They're just people.
They're just people. Exactly.
That's right.
Perfect.
All right, cool. Yeah, so it was fun to read. I can't wait for you to get through Trials of Jedi so we can discuss that sometime in the near future. We
Yes.
got to get for Into the Light first, which will be coming up here at the end of the month. But with that said, thank you for all for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and our discussion of the High Republic, Fear of the Jedi. We'll be back soon, probably covering what is being promised to be the last issue of the comics, which is the finale, sometime in the near future. But we'll be doing other things in the meantime. And if you want to catch everything that we've got going on here at Podcast Stars, make sure you've subscribed to the podcast on your podcatcher of choice. And once you've done that, we'd greatly appreciate your ratings and reviews wherever you listen. Those 5-star reviews really do power the algorithms and help others find the show. And if you want to find the entire back catalog of the show, the best place to do that is at retrozap.com, where you can find all previous 910 episodes that we've done over the previous 5 years. Jay, you want to remind everybody where we're located on social media and how else they can interact with us?
Yes, sir. We are on Facebook and Instagram conveniently at Podcast Stardust. And we still maintain our Pinterest boards with all kinds of fun ideas for everything Stardust and Star Wars, I should say. And we also have our two YouTube outlets. And so we have our traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music. So head over to both of those, like, subscribe, and share those out as well. And we still have our T Public store as well. And so if you hit up the link in our show notes, it'll take you to the T Public site where you can check out 7 different Podcast Stardust logo designs available on everything from apparel to home goods and pretty much everything in between. So once again, check out that link in our show notes.
All right, Jay, you want to remind everybody where what you've got going on with cosplay?
Sure. So you can catch me on my Instagram, which is at j.snipscosplay. And I have my cosplays of Ahsoka from the Clone Wars. I have 2 different versions of Hera, as well as my original concept Mandalorian, my fourth sister Inquisitor, as well as many, many more. And again, taking a little hiatus for the summer right now. I've got some other things in the works, but as soon as I think August amps up here, I'll be amping up as well and looking forward to some fall appearances. And Dennis, I know you just had a guest appearance on another podcast as well. So you want to fill everybody in on that?
Yeah, if you want to hear some of my recent thoughts on episode 6 of season 2 of Andor, check out Coffee with Kenobi. I was a guest with Dan Zare, our friend, this week. And yeah, it's just hit everyone's podcast feed. So go check that out. Okay, upcoming on the show on Monday, we're getting back into the Clone Wars with a look at episode 12 from season 2. And then on Wednesday, it's our monthly feature, World Between Worlds, where Jay is going to take us on a tour of the latest in Star Wars lifestyle and fashion products. With all that said, thanks for listening to episode 911 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great weekend. And until next time, may the Force be with you.